Hey there, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Evoke Greatness. This podcast was created for those of you who, like me, are driven by their curious nature and fascination with the champion mindset. If you have an insatiable hunger for growth and knowledge, or maybe you're just curious on how some of the most successful people have navigated their journey, we share the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, and all the lessons learned along the way. It doesn't matter what chapter you are on in your story. Maybe you're just getting started, or heck, maybe you're halfway through. What I know is where intention goes, energy flows. It's my most sincere hope that you will hear something in one or maybe many of these episodes that resonates with you and reminds you that you are not in this alone. As we venture into year 2, I hope that you find a sense of connection and community when you're here, because we all deserve a place where we belong. My name is Sunny, and I am so glad you're here. If you're new, there's a few things you want to know about me. I am a huge book nerd and a wee bit of a control enthusiast with an obsession for motivational coffee cups. I believe that a rising tide raises all ships, and I invite you along in this journey to evoke greatness. Welcome back to another episode of Evoke Greatness. Today, we are deep diving into the mind of an extraordinary leader. My special guest today is Scot Heathman. He spent 25 years soaring through the skies as an Air Force leader, a combat instructor, pilot, and base commander, serving over 14,000 personnel. With a passion for cultivating culture, communication, and innovation, he leads CEOs through command-level coaching programs, igniting transformation from the top down. His journey is one of resilience and mastery, reflected in his trio of master's degrees in organizational leadership, operational planning, and national security and strategic studies. He's certified in emotional intelligence, and he empowers leaders at every level to embrace vulnerability and elevate others, driving performance to the highest altitudes. Get ready to be inspired as we delve into his upcoming book, Command with Courage, Elevating Beyond Adversity, where he shares valuable insights on navigating challenges with unwavering courage. Join us as we explore the mindset of a true commander, shaping the future of leadership with every word and action. Scot, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Sunny. It's so good to see you again.
I have been looking forward to this. We have been this has been in the works for quite a while now. And you are on the mend. You had a recent surgery that you are recovering from. And so super excited for you to get to that place where you're like, all right, I feel like I can do this.
I know. It's like, take the new car out now. I'm ready to go. The repairs did what they needed to do.
That's right. I've listened to some of your history around growing up with this desire to want to fly planes.
Yeah.
In this childlike sense of wonder, right? There's these things that start to envelop us when we're little, and they cause us to, at some point, have a belief that we can actually make this come true. And so when you reflect back on all that you've done in your career in the Air Force, all that you've done in your life, what fostered that belief early on as you were developing that desire to want to fly planes?
Yeah. For me, what I know about myself now, I'm an extremely visual learner, and that's very much how I see the world. But when I think to back then, when you don't really know that about yourself, I think it was just a curiosity about things, and certainly being exposed to wonderful movies like Star Wars, right? I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Kind of back in the heyday of Star Wars, the late 70s when the
Right.
first one came out. And I was always fascinated with sci-fi and fiction. I certainly was satisfied walking around this planet, but there was a part of me that wanted to be up there, like to see things differently and understand kind of what did it look like from that perspective. I also would say, the space shuttle was a big deal in the 80s, right? This thing came out, and, I wasn't old enough or even around to watch a lot of the Mercury and Apollo missions, right? I just obviously watched it on TV. But for me, it was all about the space shuttle and learning about all these astronauts and this vehicle going up and coming back. And yes, there's some tragic moments and in NASA's history with this, but, there's tragic moments in all these things when people chase dreams. There can be some setbacks and adversity, but it inspired me. And I was like, wow, these are everyday people that go get to do this. This is their job. And I thought, well, how do I get to do some of that? And other than just kind of my own inspiration and kind of wonder, I didn't really grow up in an aviation family. Like nobody in my family flew. We didn't go flying. There was once or twice that I've gone up in like a little airplane, like a Cessna 152, or up with one of my father's clients. But that's about the closest I got. We didn't have a lot of money for flying lessons. And so everything I could do was, try to create and maintain that motivation internally, whether I was building model airplanes or watching films or whatever. And then at some point, try to figure out, how do I get from point A to point B? What is that first step? And for me, that first step was, through high school, thinking about, well, where's the best place for me to go that I can potentially afford to go? That was the military for me.
Yeah.
And service was always a big part of me and my family as well. So I think those two things very much went hand in hand. And I was like, yeah, I think this is it. I got to get into the Air Force if I'm going to fly airplanes.
Was there ever a point in that period of time where you were like, oh, what if this piece of me that just believes with everything in me that I'm going to be up there, I'm going to be doing that, I'm going to be flying the planes? Was there ever a point where you were worried that that wasn't going to fully come to fruition?
Yeah, I recently told this story. I actually failed my flight physical because I was too short. And
Wow.
some people may find that kind of funny, but there are height limits and there's sitting height limits. So for me, it was sitting height. And what I learned though through that is, once I got the paperwork back and started looking at, how is this possible? I didn't think I was too short from a sitting height perspective. I'm 5'6", but I have a short torso. And I looked, and they actually took some measurements that I had as a freshman when I first got into ROTC, and they did not update them. And my little growth spurt happened in college. So I went from about 5'1", 5'2", up to 5'6". And so it took me getting remeasured, hoping and praying that the flight doctors and the system would allow me the opportunity to submit this new data, because competing for a pilot slot is tough. At least it was at that time. And, there have been periods of time throughout the last several decades where we've needed more pilots, or we haven't needed as many. And they actually reduced the number of people that can have this opportunity. But gosh, probably through divine influence, about a week before I graduated, I was told that I got a pilot slot and I passed my physical now and everything's good to go. Right. The only thing I had to wait for was I had to wait an extra year, because there is a pipeline of students that goes through and graduates every couple weeks. So I was now kind of back with the next year class rolling through. So all I did was, they put me at an Air Force base, Whiteman Air Force Base, for the year. And then when that year was up, I was able to go down to Texas, in Del Rio, Texas, to go through my year of flight training. But yeah, that was about as close as this dream isn't going to happen as it could get. And for some other people, there are things during the flight physical process that they find out, like maybe there's a potential they could have a condition with their eyes, like glaucoma or something that the doctors see, and they're done. You can't go now. You can't go to pilot training. That's probably the other scary part, was going through that process, because not everybody's getting MRIs or EKGs, and you don't know internally how things are going if you've never. I never broke a bone. I never had some stitches in my head from a baseball accident, but other than that, I was a pretty healthy kid, and I didn't know a lot about maybe internally what might be there that I don't know about. But luckily I got through all that. But we lost quite a few people just due to the physical process alone.
Yeah. And oftentimes you don't think about that part, right? You think that somebody who
No.
has the nerve and the courage to go after that, like it's just a matter of skill set, but that's often not
Yeah.
always what they're looking at because, right, you're up in flying an airplane, flying a jet and
Yeah.
leading people in that as well. And so you do have to make sure that all those boxes are checked. I'm sure that was scary for a moment in just thinking that that may not be a realized dream.
Yeah. Yeah, it was scary because, they collect us all up in a room. They send us down to San Antonio and, you're with a group of like 15 people. And then like every 20 minutes, they wave for somebody to go in and then they don't rejoin us. And it's like, feels a little like the Hunger Games. Like, what's going on? So,
Right.
yeah, maybe somebody got disqualified because they're colorblind or they've got a murmur in their heart. And like you said, yeah, they're very protective because we don't want to put anyone in harm's way or, we might create an unsafe condition for them at altitude. And then you have all kinds of other problems to worry about. So, they're very protective of aviators and in all the services. And, when something is off with your health, you get a lot of support there. So
Right.
it's a good thing. We don't always like our flight docs, but it's a good thing, right?
Exactly. Well, in learning more about you over probably the last year and a half or so, there are so many things I think, as we surround ourselves with people who have different set of life experiences and a wisdom and a lens in which they view the world. I have appreciated, I think there are some parallels between us and there's some things that I really appreciate about you. And that is that mentality of being unwilling to accept a no, right? And that like
Yeah.
having to get creative and courageous enough to figure out a way around certain circumstances. And then also being unwilling to just like be mediocre or be status quo. What do you think has driven some of those ways of thinking, ways of being in you?
Certainly my upbringing, my family grew up in farming communities. Both my mother and father are part of farms growing up, so there's a good work ethic with that, right? It's tough work. There's no days off. There's no like, we're not going to milk the cows today. No, they have to be milked a couple times a day. I grew up though, the city kid. So for me, my parents instilling a lot of that in me was kind of how I developed, this kind of self-drive, self-motivation. Don't give up. I was, like I said, very involved, not only athletically in my community and school, but also other activities in school, like 4-H.
Mm.
Spent about 10 years in 4-H up in Minnesota, not just taking projects to the fair or things like that, but also doing other things within 4-H. I was a state ambassador and getting involved in higher levels of the organization and finding other ways to help your community. That's kind of a thread that is very much in the background of my family and extended family. Put myself through college. That was important to me because I wanted to see if I could do that. Could I come out the other end without a bill? What would I need to do? And I applied to the Air Force Academy, ROTCs and Navy and Air Force, and I got a lot of no's. I got no's from the academies. I got a no's from the Navy, ROTC, and Army, and then that call finally came in from the Air Force saying we're going to offer you a scholarship, and it was amazing to like get that. But there was a lot of no's up to that point. Like I said, I was a little kid, kind of a little guy growing up in middle school, high school. But I played varsity football and baseball. My senior year, though, I did get cut from the baseball squad. And I didn't think I would get cut. That was the furthest thing from my mind. And I remember coming home so upset about this, like thinking the wrong thing, almost like they owed me this opportunity. And
Mm.
that's not how this goes, right? So obviously a little bit immature about how I handled that and talking out loud. But my parents were like, well, what are you going to do now? Because you're not going to sit at home and mope about this. So everything was always about moving forward, not looking back and trying to control things you can't control. It's okay. Well, what are you going to do now with what you got? And then I ended up working at a car wash. I'm like, I didn't have dreams and aspirations of working at a car wash. And it was right down the road from where we lived. And the owner of this car wash, this had been a car wash that was losing money over the years. And, there was some theft and concerns with that. But then this new leader came in, completely turned this place around. And now the lines were down the roads so far that the police actually had to guide traffic to get into the car wash. Hundreds of cars a day we put through this, full service car wash. And I had some moments to spend with this leader, and this was a servant leader. I didn't really know what the terms were. I know I've had a few other leaders like this, or teachers growing up, but this is the first time I really got to spend time with someone who's running a business, and he turned this losing endeavor into a multi-million-dollar car wash. It's just incredible. And the workforce, it wasn't just kids like me. He took in folks that had been in jail and gave them a second chance. He took in folks that didn't need a handout, but a hand up. And you wouldn't have known that because, we're all in uniform. But when you looked around, even the manager, I remember specifically the manager had spent time in prison, and this was the first job he had. I thought this was like a highly experienced person. He was genuine. He was kind. He was authentic. He demanded the best out of us. If there were issues, he put his arm around us. You would have never thought this person had spent time. I don't know what he did, but it was incredible to now see like how this leader pulled this kind of a diverse team together and got us all marching in one direction. And boy, it set the conditions for me to really start looking at my future and potentially how would I lead in the Air Force? Because that was going to be my next step, was get commissioned as an officer, and you're expected to lead. You don't know how big of a team you're going to have right away. Might be 2, might be 3, but it might be a couple hundred. That servant leader, I still remember these moments in my head that I've spent with him. And even when I screwed up, he delivered feedback, but doing it in a kind way. He was direct, but there would be no disrespectful communication in the feedback delivery of correcting behavior or something like, if it was more disciplinary or, something where you wanted to change somebody's feedback. And I thought, yeah, you don't need to be a yeller screamer to get people to do what you need them to do. Right. So
Yeah.
learned a lot at that Mermaid Car Wash is what it was called.
What an awesome example of leadership. And you probably, though you knew they were the leader, though you knew that they were running things, I think even in our young eyes, sometimes we don't go, oh, what an excellent example of leadership.
Yeah.
But what it is it goes back to that quote, right? It wasn't what they did or said, but it was how they made you feel. The example in which they led themselves, they led difficult conversations. Man, that can really set the tone for someone in their formative years when they're going to be stepping into a leadership role.
Yeah. You said that, how they made you feel. It's Maya Angelou, right? That is that's my signature slide in a lot of my presentations. Like my closing slide is Maya Angelou's quote. Like you'll forget everything else, but you'll never forget how you made them feel. It's so important for leaders to understand that there's nothing transactional about that. There never should be.
You seem to have an incredible sense of self-awareness, both as a leader, as a human, just in your everyday interactions. When you think about a leader who's trying to refine or maybe even develop some of those skill sets, oftentimes we refer to it today like as EQ, right? But it's like the self-awareness, the ability of how someone shows up, the emotional piece of how they lead people. How can someone who is maybe either new to it, maybe trying to turn things around, or really just like developing and refining that skill set, what advice would you give?
Yeah, self-awareness is that foundational component of EQ. You don't just jump into relationship management and get it right. You have to start back with self. And when I look at and teach some of the strategies of self-awareness, it's funny. I think some folks feel like, oh, it's going to be these tough things, just like going to the gym, like, and And when I start showing them some of the basics of how someone with high self-awareness, what they're really good at doing, they're kind of shocked at like, that's it? I'm like, yeah, but they've been working on this and practicing for months and years, not 30 days and you're good. So some of these strategies, for me in particular, journaling, I've taken that on over the years and become a little bit more deliberate about, let's say I'm in a staff meeting and I didn't like how something was said. And, maybe I'm a little bit annoyed when I'm walking out of the office now. And I will literally go back to the office and in my notebook, write annoyed, and then think about for just a couple minutes, what was the trigger to that? What were the clues my body was telling me that I was getting to that state? And for me, have been times when I've not only had those emotions and feelings, but then did the wrong thing and acted out in a way I probably shouldn't. So the self-management piece can really hurt you too. You can be highly aware of your emotions, but still make bad decisions. It's like, again, someone cutting you off on the road. You can be upset, and then you could drive up next to them, and I've seen it. Drivers put their hands and fingers out the window, right? What value does that serve, right? People that want to get better at both those areas have to first get to a level of awareness of the feeling itself. What does it do to your body? Like, how do you feel in that state right now? Are you really grabbing on that steering wheel? Are you talking underneath your breath? Are you getting worked up and you can almost feel the body just get tense? Those are all clues. And those clues should be telling you, don't act out, not right yet. Give yourself a little bit of time, because all your body is doing in those times is that fight or flight part of your brain is the one that's in charge. And that, unfortunately, reacts 3 times faster than your decision maker in the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex. So we're already at a biological disadvantage. So what you're trying to do is give yourself an advantage. So again, for self-awareness, it's having a curiosity of who I am in those states, and not always just in negative states. Also think about what's happening in positive states, because you might be able to replicate that. And again, through journaling, I would keep track of my emotions a couple times throughout the day and just write down what the emotion was and what got me there. What did I feel when I was having that emotion? The other thing is, what's the self-talk in my head?
Mm,
Because the ego's talking. Ego's
right.
not a bad thing. It's just the voice in your head, but it's not always your amigo, as Cy Wakeman, and I love all of her books. She writes about that a lot. It's not always your amigo, but you can't turn it off. But what is it? How is that guiding your self-talk right now? That's a piece to be aware of. And for me, I can still hear maybe some negative self-talk in my head, but becoming aware of that, I'm now not letting that take me over. I'm like, and sometimes I have a conversation with it. I'm like, look, I hear you talking in my head right now, and I know what you're telling me. I don't think this is going to be productive if I go down that path, right? If I lash out, me and this other person's relationship is going to start to erode, and there's going to be friction, and we're going to lose trust in one another. So I give myself a fighting chance by thinking about and listening to some of that self-talk. Some of it's just counting to 10, taking some time to get outside and maybe take a walk. I had a command chief. Anytime he would see me kind of worked up, he was like my wingman at the base. He would come into the office and say, "Hey boss, let's go for a walk." And he'd do it. He was so calm and he had the best radio voice. And we'd just go for a walk. And sometimes we wouldn't even say a word to each other. We would just walk. And it didn't feel weird. It didn't look weird. We just walked, took in a little bit of the weather outside. Even when it was not the best weather, we would go for a walk. Sometimes we would talk, but having maybe 10, 15 minutes to be able to do that got me in a little bit better state from time to time, and really hear what was going on in my head, or calmed it down, to a level that it wasn't taking me over. So these are some things about self-awareness that we can do, some strategies that we can do to kind of bring some more awareness, almost as if you're spotlight on it. The last thing I would say is start becoming curious about what's going on inside of you, curious about the external world a little bit. Not that you're questioning everything, but maybe lean into things that don't seem comfortable. That's a little bit against where you would normally go. Maybe try something else. Experiment with this. I mean, who knows? You might find something that really works for you. So those are some of the things I think about in self-awareness. And also, I would say self-management, which tends to go hand in hand with these two.
Right. Well, and you talk so much in there about really being present with yourself in
Mm-hmm.
identifying your emotions, and not only just being present, but like write them down, because then you can go back and
Yeah.
you can really kind of unpack and tend to that, to dig a little deeper into it, which may lead a lot into my next question, which is you have had a number of right? You've had brain surgery. You
Mm-hmm.
just had a big neck surgery. These are not like little outpatient procedures. They were
No.
large surgeries, big recovery
Yeah.
time, exploration of a lot, as they're in there as well. And so I'm curious, in going through that process, I think mental resilience can help navigate that pathway to healing, right? But I'm curious,
Yeah.
like in that, what did you learn most about yourself through that process?
Yeah. For both of these, pretty naive about big surgeries like that, because like I said, to that point, maybe I've had some stitches, but that's it. Never broken a bone. And now I got tons of metal in my neck and my head, right? It's just strange to think about. So I think I had to understand how being naive to all this affected me too. To one degree, it actually helped me a little bit because I wasn't online Googling stuff and trying to be my own MD, right? So, as a former nurse, I think you probably appreciate that.
Yes. Yes.
Don't play doctor, right? And my doctors did say that, please don't go on Google and start looking this stuff up. I know what I'm
Right.
doing. And I'm like, you got it, neurosurgeon. With the brain surgery that I had a tumor removed in 2020. So I knew I was going to have a lot of time. I still had a lot of therapy to go to. So that was certainly taking up a lot of time because I couldn't walk hardly at all without a walker or with someone's help. I would fall down. I couldn't see. I had an eye patch because I had such bad double vision. I lost my hearing permanently on this side. My vestibular was really messed up, and I couldn't talk hardly at all. I could communicate, but it just wasn't not like this.
Right.
So speech, physical, occupational therapy, that was like 3 times a week. And, I really, based on what the doctors were saying, this was going to be several months to go through this. The one thing though I could do, I started thinking about, well, what can I do right now? So I'd reached a level of acceptance and acknowledgement of what was going on quite early. And I knew that that was a key to getting to this next step, because if I didn't acknowledge and just accept that all this was happening, I wasn't going to be able to move forward. So I had to kind of adjust my own aim a little bit on this. And I said, okay, you just had brain surgery, Scott. You can't do all this stuff. I got it. You're right here, right now. Okay, great. But what can I do? So now I started looking into illuminating a path forward. Like, what are the steps I could do? And funny enough, I read this book, Meditations, Marcus Aurelius's
Yes.
Meditations, right? I'm a little bit of a stoic. That's a little bit of my philosophy style. And I've read this book before, and I've read, some of Marcus Aurelius's thoughts. And this is essentially his journal. But
Right.
here's a gentleman 2,000 years ago who was the emperor of Rome at the time. He's dealing with a pandemic. He's dealt with the loss of his own children, many of his children. And here I am. I was the base commander, but I had just had this brain surgery. I'm in a pandemic. I've lost some things that I thought I would never lose. Maybe he's got something to say. And he talks a lot about perspective. And that's where I got this whole adjusting aim came from. He talked about aim a lot in there. And I'm like, it just started illuminating. And I think it served as a validation of really how I actually dealt with adversity in my past. I just didn't really put a lot of thought and pen to paper to it before. But I was literally, trying to read the book like this because I could look straight up and my vision was perfect. But if I looked down, it was double vision. So I spent about a month, reading books like this with an eye patch and highlighting and tabbing and trying to just fill myself with positive things to look forward to and deal with what I've got. Walking. I wasn't going to sit in a chair and just kind of just sit there and, space out. So I said, okay, I've got a walker. My wife can help me get down the stairs and get outside. It's not about the distance. It's just about maybe trying some steps, go to the end of the block if I can. And it's, living on base, we have all these beautiful, 100-year-old trees. So the sidewalks are all every which way. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, this is the worst environment to learn how to walk. So I'm on the street now, in our neighborhood, and everybody's like waving. They can see this colonel with a walker and an eye patch. Like, what is he doing? I was learning how to walk. I'm like, I just got to get over all that. And I would go down to the block and I'd come back and then I'd rest for a while. And then the next day I'd go back out and do it again, or sometimes a couple times a day. Other people started spending time with me, which is another key component to adjusting aim. The M to me was I got to mobilize a good team around me. Like I got to bring in positivity and not bring in the wrong stuff, which is going to upset the recipe here. Bring in things. Thank goodness Ted Lasso came out about that time. What a wealth of positivity in my life. Watched that kind of stuff and made me laugh. And I certainly shed a lot of tears. Like, this is hard. Anybody dealing with adversity, it's hard. And this is not about comparing scars with anybody. I think if you have any adversity, you got to acknowledge what you're going through and accept it. You've got to illuminate a path forward. And then you got to mobilize a good team around you. But ultimately, you got to take that first step, and that first step was scary. But I'm like, I don't care that I'm outside in a walker anymore. And you know what? Nobody else does either. They're actually probably going to cheer you on, and they certainly did for me. And that made all the difference. And now I approach everything with that same construct of those three maneuvers. And it's so impactful to me, and it's impactful to the people that I've shared it with.
I love that. And that leads us perfectly into your upcoming book. It's going to be released in the fall. You talked a little bit about that AIM method, which you have in there. Your book is called Command with Courage, Elevating Beyond Adversity. What compelled you? I mean, obviously it's, I'm sure, kind of a bit of a compilation of things, but what really compelled you to write a book and share what you shared in that with others?
Yeah. There was a little dilemma in my head about, do I want to be known as the tumor former colonel, that kind of thing? Do I really want to talk about this publicly? I know it would help, but who and what is this going to serve? Is this serving me as a therapeutic process only? And I'm doing it. But in the end, I sat with that for a while and I said, so many people have poured into me. And I think coming back to work and seeing people's reaction to like what I just went through and like how positive and optimistic I was coming out the other side, they were very inspired by that. And you and I have been inspired by things in our lives, but when it's you doing it, it's different. It wasn't for selfish reasons, but I actually very much love the aha moments that I was seeing in other people's eyes. And some people would say like, I didn't think I could, start my college degree until I heard your story. I'm like, they're making these connections. So I'm like, okay, why wouldn't I want to give something to help someone? I mean, that's what I feel like my entire career has been about, in serving others. That's my purpose has been elevating others. And that's why I named my company Elevating Others. I'm like, that is me. So in the end, it was, Scott, don't be silly. This is the obvious move, is to put this out there. If it does certainly help me in therapeutic ways, great. But that was never the overarching reason. It was somebody out there is stuck. Somebody out there has tried and failed and they won't get back on the horse, right? And so let's talk about ways that you can maneuver through this and take it one step at a time. But maybe there's some things that they're not quite getting right, that necessary steps that they have to go through to get to the positive movement standpoint. And that's what I want the book to serve as, is just another story, hopefully a good story, and some things that can be applied today in your life and maybe pull you out of a little bit of that darkness, so that you don't fall into victimhood. That's a scary place for me. That's probably another reason why I wanted to write this, is I don't ever want to be in that. That scares the heck out of me. And I don't want anybody else to be there either. So,
Right.
We have worth. We have something else to give. As long as you got the breath of life in you, let's do something with it. Right.
Right. And what a gift to give to others. That is like the epitome of a servant leader, right? Is taking our lessons, taking our failures, taking those things that we've come up against and had to really push forward and sometimes fight like hell to get through, to get on the other side of it. And that's a gift that you're sharing that, because it's inspiring, and it is allowing others to draw inside of themselves something that they may not have even known existed previously.
Yeah. And it's amazing when you spend some time, like real introspection time, what you find, some things that maybe you thought were true that weren't. And that's, been coding your operating system for all these years. And sometimes it's just shining a light on that. My coach Lindsay talks about that a lot. Let's just shine a spotlight on that and let's learn something through that. It's not about feeling embarrassed about it. We got to get past that. So,
that's the ego side of things, right? That we get embarrassed. We can grapple with it, and we can wrestle with it, and it can take us down, or we can grapple with it a little bit, recognize that it's our ego that we're having a gnashing of teeth with, and then move past that, because there's something positive to come out of it.
Absolutely.
Well, Scott, as we wrap up, man, first of all, I can't wait for your book to come out.
Thank you. Thank you.
I personally, selfishly, am super excited for that to come out, just because I respect you so much, just as a fellow outlier, but as someone who is really doing remarkable things in your life and encouraging others to do that. And I think we don't have that as much as maybe this world needs right now. And so I love to amplify and shine the light on folks who are doing that. So thank you for how you show up every single day. And thank you for the adversity, that you've overcome in everything that you've battled, and that you're sharing that. And thank you for your service. I really appreciate you just as a human and as a friend.
No, that means a lot. And, your Evoke Greatness podcast. I mean, this is such an awesome channel. It is a huge honor to share the space with you and be here today. And I look forward to our next conversation, wherever that is, hopefully in person.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, Scott. Yeah. Thanks so much, friend.
You take care.
Thank you so much for listening and for being here on this journey with me. I hope you'll stick around. If you liked this episode, it would mean the world for me if you would rate and review the podcast or share it with someone may need to hear this message. I love to hear from you all and want you to know that you can leave me a voicemail directly. If you go to my website, evokegreatness.com, and go to the Contact Me tab, you'll just hit the big old orange button and record your message. I love the feedback and comments that I've been getting, so please keep them coming. I'll leave you with the wise words of author Robin Sharma. Greatness comes by doing a few small and smart things each and every day. It comes from taking little steps consistently. It comes from making a few small chips against everything in your professional and personal life that is ordinary, so that a day eventually arrives when all that's left is the extraordinary.